Hi, my wife had a difficult cancer for 3 years and passed away in 2012 when our kids were toddlers. I wanted to share from what we learned, so I've made videos in these topic threads behind me, which you can skip around. For more on our story, you can watch the video on our background. In this video, I'm going to give lists of suggestions for letters or life shows that you might want to create. In our case, my wife had an uncommon subtype of cancer, and we knew it was almost certainly terminal for the last 15 months. So we had time to prepare, and we would sit with a video camera recording and have a conversation that we called life shows. Now it's about 10 years since she died, and I can watch the videos and enjoy them, and learn from them. I have some suggestions of topics for you to consider at any time. I think they can be important even if you're not sick. I'm going to suggest topics in some general categories. 1. Stories from your life. You can just tell funny stories and memories if you want. That's great. But I'll give a list of some questions that might point to stories about important things you've learned. 2. Life thoughts. These are topics about how you made choices in love and career. 3. Advice. These topics are about what you'd say to a friend or your kids if they encounter setbacks at work, in friendships, or in relationships. 4. If you're a parent, these topics ask you about memories you have and your experience as a parent. 5. Life understanding. These topics are bigger reviews of your life and where you found meaning, as well as your hopes for others. You might even want to do these topics for someone else based on your memory and experience of them, if they're unable to do them themselves. Now, just before I go into some details, here are some technical things to consider. First, videos are easy because you can just talk normally. Often they're better without fancy lighting or editing because it just feels like having a conversation, and that's great. Written letters might be more to your liking, and that's fine too. Just consider whether you want to make these opt-in items for other people in your life. That is, your kids or loved ones don't have to watch or read them at any time, but instead can just access them if and when they want at their option. My wife considered letters to our kids for their birthdays or life events, but read from some families that the kids felt like every birthday they were having a good time, but then had to open a grief bomb. She chose to let the kids decide. If you're doing videos, that's great. Just one comment from my experience. Difficult cancers like my wife's can change your appearance. I think it's great to make videos at any point, but as I watch videos from 10 to 12 years ago, there are ones where my wife's appearance changes due to the cancer. That's fine, but it does take your attention from the message for a minute. It does also help me, even 10 years later, to see that things were stressful back then and to understand what happened. So it's okay to have videos where your appearance might be changed, but just keep it in mind. And the final comment before we go to the video topics is to think about what you say in the videos regarding your mortality. My suggestion is that you devote one or a few videos to your thoughts about that, but otherwise to keep it out of the videos. Same thing with heavily sad emotions. Of course, they can be totally normal and natural reactions, but they can also distract from videos on other subjects. If you find yourself making reference to your mortality or breaking down when telling an otherwise fun story about your childhood, consider doing another take without those elements and using that. Your kids, for example, might like to enjoy some videos that are from a less stressed point of view. Again, it's normal and it's great if you want to do some videos where you approach those stresses head on. Now to the topic list, which I'll put on the screen. I won't read every item. You can pause the video to see yourself. I'll just pick a few to mention and describe a bit more. And it goes without saying that you can pick and choose and make up your own. These are just lists to get you going, based on what my wife and I did over 10 years ago, and what I've learned in watching them now, thinking of our family and friends, and what archives of my wife I enjoy or wish I had. The first list is life stories, and some are just normal conversational fun. But you can see from some of these questions that I'm suggesting you go into a bit more detail about how you learn to deal with some of the stresses in life, like failure or perfectionism or mistakes and anger. It's great for me to tell the story of a vacation I loved, but I think it also says important things about us to hear about what we learned from getting rejected or fired. I know my grandfather was a fresh off the boat immigrant, and I would have loved to hear both good and bad stories about it and how he learned to cope. You'll see that I suggest some specific discussions of coping strategies, like how do you use reality checking, or do you use growth narration or cognitive reappraisal as a coping strategy. Some of these coping skills I think almost everyone does. Some will be unknown to you by name, but you might use some version of them. You can just look them up and consider if you want to discuss them. My point is, telling stories about how you cope with making your way in life, or what you learned from the narrative, is a way to deepen the layers of the stories. Two of the biggest areas of our lives are love and work. These topics ask about love and work and seek to give your loved ones who watch the video some insight into how you think and navigated your life. There are also questions that might help people who get into deep and troubled waters, like what are warning signs in relationships, or how do you deal with it if someone threatens you. Those aren't normal everyday conversations, but they are tough things to deal with, and I think worth sharing your wisdom about it if you care to. This list about advice can be somewhat detailed and applicable to young adults who might watch your videos, like how do you make decisions about hobbies or extracurriculars. But the focus here is a little different. You can certainly tell stories as examples, but here the focus is giving advice to a friend or family member. How do you deal with a breakup? How do you deal with sadness and loneliness? Again, these might not be everyday conversations, but that's the good thing about videos or letters. You can take on sincere topics that are sometimes hard for people to bring up with you, and you can share what you've built from your experiences. I didn't put them here in this list, but how do you deal with success, or how do you deal with making a lot of money, are positive experiences that are just as valid to talk about what wisdom you've gained in your life. Parenting topics are challenging. For one, not everyone has kids or needs to have them for a rich and deep life worthy of archiving. And for those who do have kids, making letters or archives to speak to your kids can be very emotional. My wife and I didn't think it was absolutely necessary for a child to know their parents' life story, but we did want to give the kids some archives that spoke to the emotion that we felt as we became parents and experienced our children. Kids won't remember their early childhood, but for parents they're very meaningful times. So these questions try to explain some of that for the kids and the family to hold on to. Finally, topics about your life understanding. These are a few big questions about looking back and looking at your mortality and afterwards. Loved ones go through a lot around someone's passing and have written or recorded thoughts about what someone valued and what they wanted and what they hoped for their community can be very helpful. Sometimes you wonder if your memory of someone's wishes is accurate, or you question if you're right to be moving on. Letters or videos can be truly gifts to help your loved ones avoid complications and doubt, and to be clear about your thoughts. I'll end here quickly and say, while I hope these are helpful suggestions, of course you can throw them out and do what feels right for you. See you in another video.